Hey, Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, and in this edition of Nerd's Guide to the Galaxy, I want to talk to you about the fact that the internet browser experience is long overdue for an overhaul. Now, let's get into a bit of history first, because I want to really underscore my point here about this. And if you ever read the book, The Hard Thing About the Hard Things, it'll be linked up in the write-up for this video, which is on our website. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just check the description. You'll find a link that will take you over to our website with the full write-up and, of course, this same video. There's in the book, The Hard Thing About the Hard Things, you actually learn the story about how the group of guys who created the original internet browser came to create it and what happened. And the original Netscape, the original browser was called Netscape. And some of you remember this. I'm dating myself by telling you that I remember it. So if you remember it, you're probably dating yourself as well. But that was the first internet browser. And what's explained in the book is, they created this idea they were going to charge like a $5 a month subscription so you could use their browser and access the internet. They had raised all kinds of venture capital. And it was great until Microsoft came out, and right about the time they were ready to launch Netscape, Microsoft said, hey, we're going to launch this internet browser. It's called Internet Explorer. And essentially, when they explained all the things it did all the same things that Netscape did, and they were going to make it free. Totally killed their business model, like overnight. And those guys did okay. They moved on and formed a company. You might have heard of it. It was called America Online. And that group of guys have worked with many others to form many other very successful companies. So they all did okay. But the point that I really want to get at is the internet browser experience has really not changed much since Netscape and Internet Explorer. I mean, now Microsoft doesn't even support Internet Explorer. They have Edge, right? And most apps don't support it anymore. And then most of you are using Chrome, or if you're on a Mac, you're probably using Safari, or you might be using Chrome on a Mac as well. Chrome is, I haven't researched the actual stats, but my guess is Chrome is the most widely used browser on the internet today. But here's the thing. The experience has not changed much. And I want to cut right to the problem that I see. And keep in mind, my background, my experience with this. I am somebody who, on a daily basis just about, at some point, if not all day, is logged in with other people, and I get to see how they sort of manage their tabs in their browser. So what does it typically look like? Let me share my screen here, and I'll show you an example of what I see. Mind you, mine never looks like this. But notice here, I've got an example of Chrome open with like 100 tabs. And as you can see, I can tell that this first bunch of tabs here are Airtable tabs, but I could never possibly know from this which Airtable base I'm in, right? Or what screen or what part of Airtable I'm in. You could never tell from any of this what you're actually looking at. And I see people's browsers and how they look like this with so many tabs. I mean, these aren't even pinned, but there's so many tabs open, it looks like they're pinned. Right, which is another thing that to me is sort of the only time I use I'll pin a tab, which makes it as small as these are and puts it all the way to the left, is if I really want to keep it open but out of the way, and I'm not going to have more than one or two of them pinned, and so I know exactly what's there and why, and it's usually there because it's kind of a workflow item where I want to make sure I address whatever that that tab opens to before the end of that day or whatever. So in short order, it's not something I'm ever going to leave there overnight, in other words. And the bottom line is I've watched people struggle and then trying to click from tab to tab because there's no way you can know, which tab is what, right? And so what's the point? That's my question for you. If your browser tabs look like this, what is the point? This not only doesn't help you, it creates stress. Because literally you have to go tab by tab clicking through this to figure out. And I have one client that comes to mind. Of course, I'm not going to say who. And he may even watch this video and know I'm talking about him. But I've seen where I'm logged in with him, and he has the same Google Doc open in 3 different tabs. And I'm like, why? And the only reason for that, the only possible reason for that, is he had it open in a tab, but he couldn't remember which tab it was opened in. So he went and opened up another tab and opened the same document again. Not only is this not organized, but it creates a ton of stress. How can you possibly function like this? That's my question. If you look at my own tabs, I'm going to show you examples in a minute. You'll never see more than 3 or 4 or 5 tabs open. Bottom line, there'd be so few tabs open in any one browser session that there's enough that you can see in the name of the tab that it's crystal clear exactly what's there. If I get to a point where it starts looking like this, it's not organized. To me, what organized means is I can quickly reference something. And by quickly, I mean like 30 seconds or less, if not sooner, especially when we're talking about tabs, it should be even less. I should instantly be able to look at my tabs and know exactly which tab I need to click on to access the thing that I want to access. To add to matters in terms of how I do things, if I have several tabs open, because let's say, for example, it's a day that I'm writing a lot of content, I might have two different Google Docs open, but they'll be different documents in my case. And because there might be two different articles that I'm sort of prioritizing, and I want to make sure I work on them both. But what I'll do then is I have my own little tab workflow where the article that I'm working on, the thing that I'm working on now, is always going to be the rightmost tab. I just kind of click the tab and I'll drag it all the way to the right. Right? And that way, at least I know that that's kind of what I'm working towards, is I'm going to move over to the right and access the tabs that I need to that way, right? So again, you need to have enough visibility to see what's what in terms of these tabs. Otherwise, you've not only made it difficult or impossible to know where to go, that adds stress to your situation, right? So I don't know what people think they're accomplishing by leaving 100 tabs open like this, but I guarantee it's hurting you and not helping you. Guaranteed. Okay. So stop hoarding tabs. That's what you're doing here. That's what I call it. I call it hoarding tabs. You're hoarding tabs. Just close the thing and figure out another system, which I'm going to address and give you some suggestions about, for how to quickly get back to whatever it is that was in those tabs that you felt it was so necessary to keep open, and so many of them so that you can't possibly know where is the tab that I need right now, right? So hoarding tabs, okay? Now, there are extensions for managing tabs. I've looked at a few of them. They're okay up to a point, but as soon as you get to this level of what's on my screen in terms of the number of tabs open, even those apps, in my experience, from what I've seen, don't do a very good job of helping you to organize them. Bottom line, if you have this many tabs open, if you have this many works in progress at any one time, then you're probably multitasking, which the way I like to define multitasking is it means you're highly unfocused on a whole bunch of things at once, which means nothing's really getting done, at least not in a short order, right? The point is, get more focus, save the other stuff for later, and come up with a bookmarking system so that later on when you're ready to do the thing, you can actually quickly, in less than 30 seconds, access wherever you need to access that bookmark or that group of bookmarks and quickly get them open when you need them. But you shouldn't need to keep them open. And also this means that a lot of you are keeping your computer on with all these browser tabs open overnight, which is a big security risk, by the way. The more tabs you have open, the more ports you have open to the internet, the more channels there are through which a hacker could get into your computer. So from a security standpoint, it's a terrible idea. Close your browser at night, shut down your computer. Most of us are running with solid-state hard drives. You don't need to worry about wear and tear on the drive. Shut the damn computer down at night. You don't need to leave it open. Not to mention there's other reasons as far as the use of your RAM, which is your temporary memory that you're using when the computer's on. That starts getting maxed out over time if you haven't shut down and restart your computer periodically. I do mine every single night. Okay. Now, the other thing that these tab management extensions don't really help you with is a few important points of clarification that I know I need when I'm looking at a tab or a link that I need to be able to open up when it's time to work on a thing. Why is this tab open, right? What do I need to do in order to close this tab? In other words, what thing do I need to actually complete that is the reason why this tab is open, right? In other words, it lacks any kind of context, really. Is this tab connected in some way to another open tab? I might have a Google Doc open in one tab, and then I have Notion open in the other tab, because in Notion, I have the sort of dossier that I put together on every article I ever write and video that I ever create for each article. So I might have the Notion tab open to the Notion page that, summarizes everything about that article, and the Google Doc tab open because that's where I'm actually writing the article. And I'll show you a little bit later how that Google Doc is going to be linked in Notion, and that's a hint as to where all of this is headed. But, sticking with the extensions for managing tabs, they're good to a point, but I think they start to quickly fail us, especially when you have this many tabs that you're trying to work with all at once, right? And is there some kind of a dependency? As in, I have two different tabs open, and I really need to get this thing done first, and then I need to move on to this other thing. I'd much rather see that outlined in some kind of a workflow and some kind of a task management app where you'd put the link to the tab, to the location on the web where the first thing needs to get done, and then separately you have the link to the second tab, and so you can give it that context and say, I need to finish this thing first. Here's what that looks like when it's done. As soon as that's done, I can move on to this next thing, and here's what that looks like when it's done, and so on and so forth, right? And so, when you look at that and when you think about the questions I just posed to you, and I'll quickly recap: why is this tab open? What do I need to do in order to be able to close that tab? Is there another open tab that is in some way connected to this one? And is there some kind of a dependency, as in, do I need to do what's in this tab first before I move on to the other tab? I definitely don't have that context when I have 100 tabs open in my browser. I have no idea what order these in, if they're in any kind of order like that. If they were, I wouldn't know from looking at this. And bottom line, even with the extensions that help you manage your open tabs, I'm still going to lack that context because there's no place to make notes about anything, right? I'm just putting things somewhere, and maybe I can reorganize them, and maybe I can order them in a way that at the moment in my brain makes sense, but when I come back to this tomorrow, it may not make any sense anymore because I may forget what the thought process was, right? So it's still a terrible way to manage this stuff, in my humble opinion, which is based, of course, on my experience, right? And so, you want to have a system, and when you look at this, it sort of begs you to consider, like I alluded to, using a proper project management tool of some kind so that you can track these bookmarks, right? These links that you need to access and put the right context on it. And some of you are going to hear me say that and say, well, who's got time for that? And my answer to you is, this is going to get you time back. Because looking at what I have on my screen still now, this is, I guarantee you, eating up all kinds of time. Just the fact that you'd have to click tab by tab here to figure out where the tab is that you want to work on, that alone is slowing you down. And you may not think it's much because how long does it take to just click on a few tabs? But the reality is every time you have to go tab by tab throughout the day, it's slowing you down times 10 or 20 or 50 or 100. Right? So it's adding up. It's compounding very quickly in terms of how this slows you down. So having a proper system for organizing this and figuring out what tab you need to open and when, and in connection with what project, is going to buy you some time back. I guarantee it. And so having a system and process like this that gives you time back is what I think we need, and what I think the internet browser experience as it stands now, as it has hardly evolved since Netscape, the original browser, I think we need a better solution. I think we need something better. And so I want to talk a little bit first about how Opera, does a really good job for me of solving like 85% of this problem. I'm still not going to have exactly all the context that I'm talking about here, but it's certainly better, and I'll show you why. So here's Opera, and notice I have 4 tabs open here. That's it. And notice I can tell exactly what's what. This is the Google Drive folder for this very article that I'm recording the video for, and I can see that it's actually open to one of the images, and I did that purposely because I'm going to show you that image towards the end of this video in a few minutes. Okay. This is actually the Notion page. Notice the Google Doc link. I'll cover that more in a minute. I'm going to skip over Client X because, again, I want to show you what Opera has for organizing open tabs, which is dramatically improved, in my opinion, over any other browser out there. No other browser has something like this, not that I've seen. I'm sure somebody will tell me if they are aware of one. But over here, if I right-click this and I want to choose Manage Workspaces, I define these, and I can add more. And I even set the emojis for them to give me that clear visual. So you can see I've got personal, I've got a workspace dedicated exclusively to tabs that I have open for stuff that I'm doing for 97 and up, because that's one of my most important things in my life, right? This is a general workspace just for tabs open having to do with whatever I might be working on today. Separate from that, a specific workspace for anything related to content, right? On my other screen right now, I have the content workspace open with the Google Doc for this very article and the Notion page for this article and a few other things that have to do with other content pieces that I plan on working on today. Recovery is personal. This is where what I reserve for browser tabs that are open to things having to do with, my recovery, being clean and sober from drugs and alcohol for many, many years now. Communications. So this is also a productivity tip, right? A little pro tip. I reserve this tab for my email, I have an app that I use for my text messages so that when I'm here at my desk, I don't have to go to my phone for that. I can get my text messages right here. And that's also where I'll open tabs to like social media sites. I love this because it gives me a place. It puts my brain at ease because I know it's there at my fingertips very quickly if I want to access it and see if there's anything I need to address. There usually isn't, right? But it's there and it keeps it tucked away and it keeps it from cluttering up these other workspaces and becoming a distraction. As in, like, and I've had this experience. We probably all have. I could be writing an article and all of a sudden a fleeting thought pops in. Check your email, because that's what our brains have been trained to do. Like every 5 minutes, check your email. It's almost like my brain's trying to sabotage me. And at the worst time, as I'm getting finally into like some deep work, all of a sudden that's when my brain decides it's time to check email. And I've had to train myself not to respond to that, to ignore those mental prompts. But the more I know I have systems for how I know I'm going to get back to these things like this, the more I notice my mind is at ease and doesn't sort of serve up those reminders at those inopportune times, right? And that's something I get straight out of the book, Getting Things Done, from David Allen. So this is kind of like my getting things done method for handling open browser tabs, right? And so right now in this particular browser window, again, we're in the content workspace, right? If I click on here, there's nothing. But what I might do is just open up Notion, because everything for me in my world these days starts with Notion, right? Here's 97 and up, and then the personal stuff. So you click on these workspaces and notice I can just have different sets of tabs. Now, here's another great tip about how Opera works this way, is when I close my Opera browser, one thing that's important to note is it matters which is the last screen that's open. So in this particular screen, I don't have a lot open because my main sort of browser screen is on my other monitor, and that's where I have a bunch of things open in the different workspaces. So as long as I close this first, then I'm back to the other browser that's got all the things open that I really want to sort of keep there. I can close Opera. It will just prompt me and make sure I want to quit, and then it will assure me that, don't worry, all of your open tabs will be restored the next time you open Opera. So I don't have to worry about losing all of those tabs. With Chrome, you have one of two settings for when you open up a new Chrome session, either to open up a default tab, or you can set a specific set of tabs that open up. So in order to accomplish something similar like that in Chrome, I would have to update that default set of tabs every time before I close the browser to whatever the current list of open tabs might be, right? So it's a little bit of work, and I have to kind of go deep into Chrome settings in order to do that. Here it's just built in by default. It's how Opera behaves, right? Now, the other thing that I really like about Opera and what it lets me do is what you're seeing on my screen here, which is called speed dial. So I have configured these tabs. I've got them in a certain order based on the fact that top left, Notion is the thing I access most frequently. Kajabi second most, right? Nimble is here because I recently wanted to make it more of a priority as something I'm accessing more often for specific reasons I won't go into in this video because it's not the subject of this video. Here, of course, is QuickBooks Online. I wish they'd let you customize these a little bit more, but there's no way to do that. Opera will suggest ones like these down here, which when they suggest it, they give you these pretty icons, but there's no way to kind of customize this and say, hey, I'd like to, if I edit it, all I can do is edit the name or the address, and the name appears down here, which you can barely see against my background. So I wish I had a little bit more flexibility here with respect to how I can customize this. But either way, this is great because I open up a new tab, this is what I see, and it gives me, as you can see, access at my fingertips to things I access very frequently. Right? So I love the speed dial thing. You'll also find speed dial here in the bookmarks bar for Opera, which is another thing that I like about Opera that I feel Opera handles better than any other browser as far as bookmarks go, because I can click this thumbtack now, which kind of docks my bookmarks bar. And now if I want to open up 3 or 4 different things, let me switch to a different workspace. All right, we'll do the tent. That's I can explain that. That's kind of a funny one. But now I can click, if I want to open 3 different apps here, I can just click them, and notice what happens is, the tabs open up right here, and I don't lose my place. If I try to do that in Chrome, first of all, I had to bookmark the bookmarks page, right? And if I go over into here, and I haven't updated this in forever, so these bookmarks are already really old. As soon as I double click one of these, let's say I want to go into Giraffe, see what it does? It takes me into the tab that's opening up in Giraffe, and my bookmarks tab is stuck way back here. So I lose my place. which is annoying when I know I have 3 or 4 different, apps that I want to open up because I'm about to work on a client, let's say, where these are the 3 or 4 apps I know I need to have open when I'm working on their stuff, right? So to me, this is much improved. And then, of course, I can undock it when I don't need it anymore. But it allows me to get access very quickly to the things I need when I need it with minimal friction, right? And that's what I'm going for here. So let me go back to my content workspace, and we'll keep going, right? Now, what's the downside of Opera? The downside of Opera is the fact that it's not widely used, which means a lot of app developers don't support it. Okay, if you look at most apps now, and if you ping their support because you're having trouble with that app, one of the first things they'll want to know is which browser are you using, because they need to know that so they can kind of figure out if they can reproduce the error you're encountering. And there may be a known issue about a particular browser and how it's behaving. Most of them will get back to you. If you tell them you're using Opera, they're going to say, we don't support Opera. Now, from what I've seen, Opera seems to run on a very, very similar framework to Chrome. So generally speaking, if it works in Chrome, it's going to work in Opera. There have been some exceptions I've encountered. So bottom line, if you reach out to support and tell them you're using Opera, they're going to say, we can't help you. Most apps and app developers, if you ask them for a list of the browsers they support, it's going to be Edge, not Internet Explorer anymore. They'll even specifically say they don't support Internet Explorer. It's going to be Microsoft Edge. It's going to be Chrome, of course. It's going to be Safari for Mac users. And that may be about it. That might actually be the entire list of what they support. Chrome, Edge, and Safari for Mac users. Some still support Firefox, but I'm surprised how many don't even support Firefox anymore. So, that's something to consider, which is why I still keep these other browsers handy. In fact, what I do if I run into something that's not working well in Opera is I'll open up Edge. And I'll use Edge, and that's one. If nothing else, I'll use it to test, is this an issue of Opera just not playing well with this app because it doesn't support Opera, or is it something else? Is it an actual issue? So I'll go into Edge, and I'll use Edge to log into that same app in Edge and reproduce the same thing and see if it suddenly works in Edge. Then I know it's an Opera thing. The other thing, of course, to always keep in mind is it may be that you have to clear your browser history. Right, so I'll do that in Opera, to see if that fixes it. If that doesn't work, then I go to Edge, do it. And if it works in Edge, I know I don't have any history really in Edge to speak of because I hardly use it. I only use it for situations like this. And if you look at Edge's bookmarks, similar to Opera, it gives you the ability to dock the bookmarks on the right. It also has a cool feature where, notice when I'm in a new tab, it shows my bookmarks bar. Let's say I click now to go into my website. Notice that disappears. That is a specific setting. So over here where it says Show Favorites bar, I can choose only on new tabs, which makes a lot of sense to me because once I've chosen where I want to go, I don't necessarily need that anymore until I open up yet another new tab. But of course, you have the option to show it always or never as well, right? And of course, if you choose never, then you can still access it the way I've done here. I don't know why they have it on the right and not the left. That sort of drives me crazy. I looked around sort of frantically to see if there's an option to put it on the left, but there's not. So I guess somebody at Microsoft somewhere decided it was better on the right and that you wouldn't need or want it anywhere else. Again, I can undock it and then click away, and then I can dock it again. So, and the other thing is Edge is probably the newest browser out there. So it's got a good design. I tried it. Even though it's Microsoft, and anybody who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of Microsoft stuff. I don't feel like their stuff is generally very intuitive. But Edge is designed really well. I've read a ton of articles that speak to this and confirm it abundantly, that it's just a really well-designed browser. So to me, that's my second choice after Opera. When Opera doesn't work, I go to Edge, right? So again, the browser experience needs an overhaul. No question about it. Hasn't evolved much since, 1991, when I think that's roughly when the first browser Netscape came out, and then Internet Explorer pretty much simultaneously with that. So what's the answer? Well, I'm not going to wait around for the people who make browsers to figure this out. Nobody has. It's been a really long time. But this is where I want to talk about Notion. And I believe that Notion solves all of these problems. Of course, you have to do some setup. And what's the expression I'm looking for here? Anything worthwhile is going to take some time, some work, some investment. You're going to have to put something into it if you want something really good out of it. So, one example is one reason that I think Notion solves all these problems is context, which is the whole problem I addressed that exists in the first place. Even with workspaces in Opera, which I feel make a dramatic improvement, it still lacks the context. I still don't, I can click over here, but I still don't have a good way of identifying, why these tabs are open. By the way, the tent is what I kind of call it, just my own fun little internal way of addressing it. This is for like when I have deep work that I want to do, when I know I need to get really focused on something. It's usually related to client work that I'm doing for companies that I actually do the accounting for. And if I do need to do some complex stuff that requires a high degree of focus, I'll just, in my mind, I'll say, all right, I'm going to put this in the tent. And then I come in here and I'm deeply focused, right? Like nothing else. Like you would never, ever find my email open in this workspace unless I needed to get into email to get some information for what I'm working on while I'm here, right? And I think there's just actually a lot of psychology to this. Even doing something like this, like I know in my mind being in here means I am focused, right? So a lot of times that's what I'll do. You can easily move these tabs between workspaces, right? So from here, I can move it to any other workspace besides the tent because that's what it's in, okay? So if I go back here to the content tab, I'm going to close the speed dial thing. I want to actually show you this guy. So, actually, I don't want to show you this guy. Not yet. Anyway, I'm going to show you an example here of something I do for 97 and up. So, 97 and up, is a paid program. And I'm in Notion here on Client X, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And let's go to the 97 and up. Oops. Homepage. This is a page that I created that just kind of summarizes everything at a high level that anybody in the 97 Up program needs access to. We do our calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm frequently getting messages from people, of course, right at 11 a.m. when the meeting's starting, that's when they think they to ask me for the link. And it's usually at that point I'm trying to get the meeting started. I don't have time to go copying and pasting links for people. And that is even with the fact that I've made it very clear that every Tuesday and Thursday, just before that call, sometimes just as it's starting, I paste the link into our general Slack channel so that people don't have far to go to find it when they need it. And I still sometimes get people, messaging me in other places, emailing me saying, hey, where's the link for this week's meeting? And anyway, so I said, I'm going to give you a homepage. I need you to bookmark the link to this homepage so that anything you need access to regarding this program, including and especially the meeting info, is going to be right here at your fingertips. I've also given them links to how to access the 97 Up website. So when they click on that, it's going to take you right in. Of course, you have to be logged into my site. But here's all the sort of sections in the 97 and Up program, including the 2023 curriculum that we're developing as we go right now, right? Here's a suggestion box that I created, so that's another link that people can click on, and it takes you over to a forum where you can put in a suggestion if you have a topic you're requesting that we cover, and even the Slack login. In case you're not logged into Slack, you bought a new machine and you're trying to get logged in, and you don't know what the URL is because you've just been in the app for years, right? And then further down here, I have a calendar view which outlines the exact weekly calls and what we're doing on each call. And you can see from what you can see here, the ones that are in the past have links to them so that you can access this right from here. You have all the context. This is the sort of show notes from the call. And then, of course, the recording URL to watch the replay is right there. So once again, as long as you're logged in on my website, you click over and there you are, and you can watch the replay. And if you're a Notion user yourself, you can make a copy of these notes, bring it into your own Notion account, and supplement my notes with your own. So this is context. This is where we are taking what we don't have in the browser experience and setting it up for ourselves to put everything we need right at our own fingertips, right? So that is the example of how I do this in 97 and up, where, again, I'm just managing the links and giving you what you need at a high level. Let's go back down here and talk about what this might look like for a client. So here in this sample workspace, I've got Client X. This is the master page for this client where I'm going to access everything I need for this client. And over here, I've got Client Bookmarks. And within here, I've got links to QuickBooks Online to go log in, their Google Drive folder on the web, a file path I can copy and paste in Internet Explorer, not Internet Explorer, I'm sorry, in Windows Explorer. And then if I, in this example, I'm saying I might have Airtable projects for this client, so I've got a link here to whatever I need for them in Airtable. That's one way to do it, right? It's not the way that I do it actually, but it's one way, and that's the beauty of this, is you design it, you set it up to work in whatever way works best for you and makes the most sense to you. So I'm going to end with this. I'm going to show you really quickly how I do this with an actual client. And of course, I'll just blur out the stuff that I don't want you to see. So if I go to this client, First Factory Inc., what you'll see as you look through here, the way I've got all of his notes organized in my system, I have an item type called bookmark, and this is his Google Drive. Right? So anytime I need a bookmark to something that I need to access when I'm working on his stuff, I'm just going to give it a status of reference and an item type of bookmark. And I can create a view in here when I have many of them. I don't in his case, but if it starts accumulating, I'll just create a separate view called bookmarks, and it'll be filtered for the item type bookmarks. But as you can see here, so it's more sort of deep context, where this is specifically just what I need to access his Google Drive stuff, both on the web and locally. And then, of course, I have this whole entire page and all the sort of worlds that opens me up to, where I can provide all the other context I need. If there are specific things in Google Drive that I want to have quick access to, I can put them in here. But more than likely, what I'm going to do on something like that is I'm going to take that link to that Google document and embed it as a bookmark on the page that is about that particular project that I'm working on for that client. Right? So this was the image I had created of that, but instead I decided to just take you there and show it to you directly. But that is it, my friends. It is your call. You can set this up however you want to. Quick recap. Internet browser experience needs an overhaul. It's long overdue. Not sure there's a great solution for that. I like Opera the best for the reasons I showed you, for the way it lets you manage the workspaces and the bookmarks. My second choice is Edge. Chrome I keep around because I'm a heavy Google Workspace user, and sometimes I just need Chrome. But ultimately, my best choice for how to manage this kind of stuff is going to be Notion, because Notion, as I've just shown you, gives you the opportunity to provide all the context you need around what you need to access at this very moment when you're working on that project or thing that is driving why you need access to everything you need access to. That, my friends, is my 2 cents or 10 cents worth on the fact that the internet browser experience is in dire need of an overhaul. It's long overdue. As always, I hope you had some fun here. I hope you learned something along the way. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in the galaxy.